Did it say it's recording?
There it is.
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. Well, welcome everyone for joining this call. We are going to be talking about imposter syndrome, and I'll give a little bit of a summary of what we're going to be talking about specifically with this. But before we do that, I want to give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves. So my name is Jennifer Perretta, and I work on the HR team, and I've been with Molson Coors CDC for 3 years now. Go for it, Dan.
Hey, I'm Dan Bonach. I'm the Director of Human Resources at CDC. Been here just over 5 years. Excited to participate today. Thanks.
Sarah?
I'm on the marketing activations team, and I have been sort of distributing for almost a year. It'll be a year next month.
Alex?
I'm Alexandra Feir. I'm on the on-premise sales team, and I've been with Coors. It'll be 2 years in May.
Awesome. And Rose?
Yeah, I'm Rose Green. I'm on the pricing team. I just started a couple of weeks ago, but I'm super excited for the opportunity to join you guys. So thank you for welcoming me.
Well, I'm excited to have all of you. So just a little bit of background. We're going to be doing this one a little bit differently than normal. So this one will be kind of based off of an article that was released by the Harvard Business Review called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. And then just as a quick summary on the article, so imposter syndrome, or doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud at work, is a diagnosis often given to a woman. But the fact that it's considered a diagnosis is problematic. The concept, whose development in the 70s excluded the effects of systemic racism, classism, xenophobia, and other biases, took a fairly universal feeling of discomfort, second guessing, and mild anxiety in the workplace and pathologized it. Can't pronounce that word, especially for women. The answer to overcoming imposter syndrome is not to fix individuals, but to create an environment that fosters a number of different leadership styles where diversity of racial, ethnic, and gender identities is viewed as just as professional as the current model. So that's just a quick summary of it. We'll also link it in the email as well. But just to kick things off, I kind of just wanted to have everyone talk about their relationship, their experience with imposter syndrome in their lives. So I don't know if anyone wants to get started, or I'm happy to do so.
I can start. I can start it off. Personally, for me at CDC specifically, I've worked for 3 different managers in the on-premise team in just a short period of time. All of them have been men. But then, we call Melinda our mama bear, and she kind of runs the whole group of us. And I mean, beer probably like 30 years ago, people think it's such a man's world. But just in my experience in the 2 years here, there's a lot of pretty awesome women that work for the company and hold, a lot of recognition, which is just incredible and gives you kind of an empowering nature. And I mean, it's definitely a teamwork makes the dream work sort of feel. So.
Sarah or Rose, do you have any thoughts on the overall subject of imposter syndrome and your experience with it?
I was kind of thinking of it as there was something in the article that kind of popped out to me that had mentioned something about microaggressions and a woman's everyday battle with microaggressions. And I think after reading this article, I took what people were saying to me as maybe positive or trying to put a spin on something that they think I need to work on as a microaggression. So saying, well, you speak up a lot, and we love your enthusiasm, but maybe take a step back and not have your opinion, which in some instances I very much understand, because I do need to be better at listening a little more before in instances where with a company for a while and I have the ability to be able to speak up and I feel confident about it, but still get those microaggressions. That had really put something in perspective because I never really thought of it until I read this article.
And I can say for myself, I'm not sure if I've ever felt necessarily like I have experienced imposter syndrome, related to being a woman. I feel imposter syndrome all the time about being in a STEM job with very little STEM background, but that's more of a personal thing. As far as like, one thing that this pointed out that's really important, I think, is the consideration of what is the environment, what do we consider professional, and what is like the environment telling us is correct. And I always think about this one from this previous job. When I just started, it was like my first day, and the manager said that it was business casual, and then he said like khakis or jeans is fine with a collared shirt. And I remember being like, you didn't change what you said, you just sort of said that, but a collared shirt for a woman generally is a very formal thing to wear. We don't really wear collared shirts that often. And what he meant was like a golf shirt, like a polo shirt, but that's just not really common for women's wear. So I remember being like, what does that mean? And it was just sort of funny because professional was this image of what men would wear, like the business casual men's version. And that was just what he went with. That was his default. And it was just sort of a funny thing. Something really simple, really small, like you said, like a really micro thing, but and I don't think he intended to harm with it, but it was just sort of funny, that frame of like he's framing everything from the perspective of what professionalism is for men. So I just thought it was really interesting. And there's been a lot of experiences like that I've had, or fighting for things like better pay and things like that. But I wouldn't say that I so much have imposter syndrome, because I'm always the one who's like, no, and fights it. But I see it around me for sure.
That's awesome. Dan, do you have like any perspective on it too? I don't know if you've seen it from other women or have felt like you've experienced it.
Yeah, so I look at it probably at a 10,000 foot level, but when I see it, it certainly speaks to me. So I in my role, I look for those opportunities where I can remove some of those biases or some of those historical perceptions. I think our SLT is a prime example, right? We have one female on the SLT, and I find it really important, for me as a male to avoid things like, always deferring to the female to take notes or to order lunch or to, do some of those things. And I think the more that we all bring a new perspective to work to say, hey, it's not the female's job to do that. It's everybody's job to pitch in and participate in that type of stuff. I think doing small things like that goes a long way. And I mean, obviously I'll defer to you guys to agree or disagree with that. But I see that as one thing. I see it as, as my role and obligation, right, to support female development, to support engagement across the company, and really what I look at it as more of a mutual respect thing, right? So it's not so much male, female, but how do we treat everyone the same, and how do we do that? Rose, I really like your example. I think it's a great example, right? I mean, a collared shirt, sometimes male supervisors may not be equipped to understand, and differentiate what does business casual look like for a female. So I think that's a really good example.
Yeah, I actually do like that example, because now it's making me think back from like a new hire standpoint. In that email, we do add like what are some not requirements, but suggestions for wear, and I'm like, I wonder if we do have collared shirt on there as the only item. So it's kind of good, having these conversations, because it puts a lot of it into perspective that you wouldn't necessarily think about, even as a female. Like, I feel like we catch ourselves doing things like that unless we're talking about it, we won't necessarily realize it. And then for my own personal experience with imposter syndrome, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I have absolutely dealt with it. I feel like I deal with it every single day in my life, because half the time I feel like I'm not qualified or I'm not good enough. And I think this article in itself put a lot of that into perspective for me on why I feel that way, right? So I do think there is some internal aspect to it, but I never realized how much external factors impact that. And I think that's why I appreciated this article, because it kind of made me feel like I don't have to do this on my own, and I don't have to sit around and try to fix myself, because at the end of the day, there's a lot more to it than just internal feelings around whether I'm qualified or non-qualified. So I feel like that kind of segues into just overall thoughts on the article and how you feel it did it change your perspective? Or did it kind of reiterate what you were always thinking about when it comes to imposter syndrome?
I thought the article was like very two-dimensional. There's the whole part of so much like of it being self-imposed, and then there's another layer of the societal factors, and why we do impose those feelings on ourselves in day to day without even actually maybe tuning into the fact that we do so. And that's just society. I mean, even I was a psych major, and I studied development between genders, and girls like mature faster, but then boys have this confidence that comes out earlier, and it's just the world we live in. But specifically back to our positions at Coors, I mean, it just really does take the job of a supervisor to encourage, and it takes a whole teamwork of psychology to encourage and uplift. And fortunately enough, I think we do a very good job at that. So.
Yeah, piggybacking off of Alex's statement, with about managers and they're the ones that I think your new job for a longer period of time than you think that you need. And I think that has put on imposter syndrome on me, because I feel like I should be picking up things faster, but it isn't because of my pace of learning. It's just because this is a completely new environment for me. And even starting with COVID, that has added a completely new thing on top of it, and learning things all over again now with things starting to open up. But I have made the correlation of me learning in a new position and me feeling that stress and anxiety of imposter syndrome linking. But going back to management, I think it's important for management to say, yes, you have your 30, 60 day, 90, time span, but you're not just going to know everything. And I was fortunate that I had a manager at the time that was able to that. That's kind of my thought on that.
I appreciate that.
So for me, I thought this was really, really interesting, because I've always thought of imposter syndrome and thought about it as, more of a personal problem, and I didn't really think so much about the how the professional environment around a person could be a lot of what's causing imposter syndrome. I guess I never really correlated the two together, but it makes a lot of sense, because, like I said, for me myself, I might not struggle with the imposter syndrome so much, but I absolutely struggle with the day-to-days of what we've decided is like a professional environment, and how a lot of that is really male, white male centric. And so, I think it's difficult because it's going to be hard. And I think a lot of it is really thinking a lot about what you do and what you say, and how small little things like the example I brought up, or other small things, how you speak to someone, or what specifically you're saying. Things like, maybe, I like your passion, but maybe you need to tone it down a little bit, or something like that. How some of those things can be gender charged. And I really think that it's important to take yourself out of your comfortable position and think like, hey, did I say something that might upset somebody else? Because it isn't necessarily their job to say to you, hey, what you said upset me, especially if you're a superior, because that could make them feel uncomfortable. So it's more your job to say like, hey, maybe what I said wasn't quite right, and I'm going to fix it next time. Maybe you apologize, maybe you don't. Maybe it's just something that you learn from. So I think it's a hard thing to do. It's difficult for all of us, and we're all going to be really uncomfortable. But I think it really is a good step forward. Just small things. Just try to change little things in your daily life if you have the ability to.
How do you think we can create an environment where people do become more aware of those type of things, right? Because I think I agree with you where I don't think the recipient is the one who's responsible for kind of bringing it up. But how do we ensure like that person, that leader, that person who's giving the feedback is aware that that's not okay or should have been approached differently? And I don't know if you know the answer, just overall thoughts on it.
I I actually have like a very kind of funny example. A couple weeks ago, Juan is my area sales manager, and it was the first week of indoor dining reopening, and we had to dump a lot of beer that week, and we were given a little bit of a heads up on PBR kegs, and I have an account that goes through quite a few of them, and they have stairs to their keg cooler, and it was Friday at 3:30, and it was not the call Juan probably wanted. But I was like, I have 6 PBR kegs that I really, really, really would like to bring them before we dump them all, because it'll be, a month till they're back. And of course, he was there in a heartbeat. And I'm like talking out loud to myself, to him, well, maybe one day I could learn how to bring this keg down maybe I can practice. And I'm just talking out loud. And he turns and he looks at me and he's like, that's not a job. That's not, you don't need to know how to do that. Like, we put you in a position because you have a certain set of skills, and bringing kegs down steps is not a requirement. But I was so fixated on being self-reliant, that I'm like talking out loud, and he's like, no, we'd never ask that of you. Always call me, which I thought was, him giving me the encouragement to ask for help and to be a part of a team, and to realize that I was, chosen to be put into a downtown route because of, things other than being able to bring a keg downstairs, which I hope I never have to try and do. I don't think it would go too well, but.
So for me, it's things like that, Alex, that help, I think, the male dominated environment that we work in, right? So where managers reinforce, where managers encourage, where managers, I love the initiative that was taken there. And I think it's a perfect way to help you as a woman feel, welcome in the world that we live in and the industry that we're in.
Yeah, I definitely took it home with me and thought about it. Obviously, still thinking about it, and I don't even know if Juan thought about it how I did. It was just second nature of him to be like, you were chosen to be here for so many other things that this is not a requirement, But I don't know, it stuck with me. So.
I also would say that as far as, what we were just discussing as well, like when you're talking about what can people do to maybe become aware of some of the things that they might be doing that are, not as equal, or what they're trying to really say. I think I would say frame it from a perspective of, would you say the exact same thing to somebody who is different? Or what is the reason that you're saying the thing? Like, are you saying are you saying that you want them to be a little bit less intense because you're finding them annoying? Is it something specifically that they're doing wrong that they can address, or is it like a personality thing? Would you say that same thing to another person who is male? Would you say that same thing to another person who is female? And just kind of just, you know, reset your brain to think, okay, well, would I ask that same thing or say that same thing to another person? If it truly is something that that person's individually doing that's a problem, perfect. You have your, opportunity to, suggest a change to them. That's great. That's awesome. But if you think to yourself, I might not say that specific thing about Joe because maybe it's just because I think that, women can be more complaining, like then maybe you need to say, that's a problem in my brain that I have to change. I just have to reroute it because it's embedded, it's cultural, it's society, just like you said, Alexandra. It's like, it's something that we grow up with and it's so much a part of our culture. So it's a really hard change to make. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you need to learn and grow. That's it.
Yeah.
Very simple.
No, that's a good point. And actually, it goes back to like the biases that we all have that we may not necessarily know about, which I'll plug in our event next week on Tuesday, which we'll talk about the science behind it and how we could kind of tackle some of that personally. And I know we are short on time. We got 5 more minutes. So, kind of to close things out, I want to kind of end it with, what do you think a company's role is in driving some of this change internally, so that women don't necessarily have to feel imposter syndrome based off of those factors?
I think going back to, just the systemic biases that we have, I think if we just are aware of them and a company brings light to them, then it can click something in someone's head that they also need to think about it. So it's not really trying to change anything. It's really just bringing up the facts for people to use those tools and resources their way.
I think corporations, like, they're just, they're communities. It's like it takes a village to promote someone to feel welcomed and appreciated. And so it's kind of like your own family, and just takes a whole group, men, women, different different races, ages, just a whole group psychology to, all be on the same platform and have a common goal and just respect each other, which I think we do a pretty good job of.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you. I think that the awareness factor is the most important. Just say it, because if you say it, then you can try to think about it in the future. And maybe if you didn't think of that, maybe somebody else did. Everybody, like you said, it's a village. Everybody is responsible. Everybody is accountable. So if you see something that you don't think seems right, even if it's not related to you, maybe you might want to say something. Maybe even if it's subtle, simple, you don't want to like say, hey, you shouldn't say that. Maybe say like, that was kind of odd, like just give them an opportunity to think about it themselves, because nobody wants to be a bad person. Nobody wants to have these biases. I think that most of us just want to grow and become better, but we just have them and we don't even know. So I think if everybody contributes and everybody's accountable, that will go a long way.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. I think, for me, it's creating the safe environment and finding ways to create opportunities, right? So giving managers talking points, giving managers, the D&I moments that we do on a monthly basis, giving the tools and resources to engage in those conversations. I see, this conversation similar to, when we talk about Black History Month, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, opening the door to the conversation so that, the recipient doesn't get defensive. We are open to the discussion, open to the dialogue, open to learning and educating ourselves. I think if we can all put ourselves in the situation where, we look at it with positive intent and we look at it with, hey, this person wants to grow, this person wants to understand, I think then and only then can we be successful, as a team, as a culture, as an organization.
I agree with everything you all said, and I also think it's the responsibility of a company to create an equitable environment for everyone to succeed. And I do a lot of research around DEI all the time, and one of the things that really popped out to me recently was anytime a company or leadership team or any decision is being made at a company, there are 4 questions that should be asked for every decision. So it's like, who's making the decision? Who's benefiting, who's being impacted, and who's paying for it. And I've learned from that by asking those questions, you help make decisions that end up being equitable for everyone across, no matter who they are. So I think there's various things companies can do to drive some of that. And hopefully one day we could get to a point where external factors aren't the ones creating imposter syndrome. But I think slowly and surely we could get there. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. I know we are at that cutoff point, but I appreciate the conversation, your candid comments, and your experiences. I think this creates a really great conversation for people to kind of learn from. And I'll definitely look to do more of these in the future, but I do appreciate you taking the time to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye, everybody.